the United States of America is the biggest scofflaw on the planet. The United States does not have the right to judge anybody. I mean, the country that violates the UN Charter the most is the United States of America.
大家好，欢迎来到正经脉动。前几天我们在节目中分享了一段维杰·普拉萨德在2025年的激情演讲，很多朋友留言说非常喜欢。这期节目呢，我们就再来分享一段他在2021年9月一场闭门演讲里面的精彩片段。这段演讲里，他从头到尾充满了力量。首先抛出了一个非常深刻的观点：谁是这个星球上最大的法律无赖？他用国际刑事法院的例子，揭示了美国在国际法上的双重标准和霸道行径。然后他用大量篇幅，以一种像脱口秀一样的辛辣方式，嘲讽了美国在阿富汗的耻辱性溃败，以及 AUKUS， 就是澳英美联盟这个在他看来荒谬绝伦的白人殖民者的小圈子。最后他谈到了中国，他用一种非常有趣的方式解构了西方世界对中国的普遍不解和种族主义式的想象。好，让我们一起来感受一下4年前的普拉萨德是如何用他那充满激情力量和讽刺的语言来解剖这个世界的。
I mean, the country that violates the UN Charter the most is the United States of America. It's not China. It's not Russia. It's not India. It's not Mexico. It's certainly not Cuba. It's certainly not Cuba. It's the United States of America. The United States of America is the biggest scofflaw on the planet. The United States of America didn't even have the decency to sign the Treaty of Rome. The Treaty of Rome, friends, is the reason we have a so-called international criminal court. It's a so-called international criminal court because the biggest international criminal is not a signatory to it. And the biggest international criminal is the United States of Amnesia, America, whatever you want to call it, the US, etc. Didn't sign the Treaty of Rome, will not allow a file to be opened to investigate US war crimes in Afghanistan and in Iraq. Mike Pompeo, head of the CIA, Secretary of State under Donald Trump, future President of the United States of America. That's what you say. You know how it goes in this great United States of America? You have President Nixon, and then you say, it can't get worse than this. And then you get Ronald Reagan, and then you say, it can't get worse than this. Then you get George W. Bush, can't get worse than this, and then you get Barack Obama, and it's the worst thing possible. Okay, I meant Donald Trump. Okay, I know. Some of you have incipient democratic sensibilities. You don't want me to criticize Obama. Okay. We'll put that off for another day. That's okay. It's okay. It's fine. The United States of America cannot have a file opened at the International Criminal Court on its behavior in Afghanistan or Iraq, and Mike Pompeo had the indecency to sanction Special Prosecutor at the ICC Fatih Bensouda and her family. They would not be allowed to get visas. She was not allowed to get a visa to enter the United States to brief the UN Security Council because she had the nerve to open a file on US criminal activity in Afghanistan and Iraq. We know there were war crimes committed, and you know why we know that. We know that thanks to the bravery of Chelsea Manning and the WikiLeaks organization led by Julian Assange. We know this. Because Chelsea Manning bravely downloaded enough evidence of serious war crimes conducted by the United States in Iraq and Afghanistan. We know that. We know that. There's enough evidence out there. But Mike Pompeo decided, no, the ICC doesn't have the jurisdiction. Actually, they don't mean doesn't have the jurisdiction. What they mean is they don't have the right. Because what they're saying is white supremacy does not have the right to be judged by anybody. After NATO bombed Libya, the lead lawyer at NATO, Peter Olson, was asked by the United Nations to release bombing information so that the United Nations could judge whether NATO exceeded the mandate of UN Security Council 1973. That's what allowed NATO to bomb Libya under Charter 7 of the UN Charter, Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. Peter Olson wrote back and said, no, NATO does not commit war crimes. Only savages commit war crimes. See, I know you're wondering, this is supposed to be about China. This is supposed to be about China. Why is he talking about the United States? Because, friends, frankly, the United States does not have the right to judge anybody. It's not just that the United States doesn't have the right to judge anybody. Look what the United States is doing. I mean, just think about this. I talked about Code Pink. Code Pink said in 2001, don't go to war in Afghanistan. The only elected official that joined Code Pink was Barbara Lee of California. Every single other member of the United States Congress enthusiastically said, let's go ahead and bomb that shitty country. That's what they said. Every single elected official of the United States government said, let's go and destroy Afghanistan. 20 years later, the United States has been humiliated by the Afghans. Now, I'm no fan of the Taliban, okay? I'm a Marxist, I'm a communist, I believe in women's emancipation, I believe in gay rights, I believe in everything good, decent, and sensitive in the world, which basically is everything the Taliban does not believe in, okay? So I'm not cheerleading for the Taliban. I think those guys are crazy, and I don't think they should be in power in Afghanistan. But let me tell you one thing. You can't defeat them by bombing them from the sky. You just can't do that. And that was the humiliation. The United States went all, we're coming, cowboys, big bombers, big, special forces, Charlie's in town, etc. Got the big gun, I got the gear, and then the Taliban hiding behind a rock, just bang. And, Uncle Sam is like, where's the airport? I'm going home. Thank you for your service, sir. It's a humiliation, guys. It's a humiliation. Let's face it. What does Joe Biden do? Overseeing a humiliation, airport not secured. There will never be another terrorist act. And then boom, there's a terrorist act. What the hell do you call the explosion at the airport in Kabul? There will never be. It's incoherent, and the US media is incoherent. Well, we've never had a terrorist attack. There's just a terrorist attack yesterday, man. What do you call that? That's an explosion at the Kabul airport. That's not an explosion. That's, right? Strange. They live in a strange world. They think we are strange. That's what I find funny. I meet my journalist friends and they're like, man, you're like a lunatic, And I'm like, I'm a lunatic. You're the lunatic. I mean, like there was an explosion at the airport, right? What's that? Like, oh, yeah, I forgot. Sorry. It's not a terrorist attack because guess what? Oh, Afghans died. I forgot. It's not a terrorist act because Afghans died. If there had been more Americans killed, that would have been a terrorist. I forgot. Sorry. You're right. There hasn't been a terrorist act since 9/11. Because since 9/11, Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, they've mainly been killing Syrians, Kenyans, people in Uganda, sorry, I forgot. That's not a terrorist act. That's just savages killing savages. Whole other different thing. It's only a terrorist act when white supremacy is poked in the eye. That's a terrorist act. I forgot. Therefore, how do they even imagine what they're saying to be credible? We've defeated the terrorists, and then boom, there's an explosion. Right after that humiliation, the United States knocks on the door of the Australians. And here's another credible country, guys. Knocks on the door. Scott Morrison, we have a proposition for you. And guess who else is coming? It's like one of those TV joke things with puppets, That's like, hey, I'm Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson, Scott Morrison, Joe Biden. Wow. What a threesome. And then they come up with this name, AUKUS. What the hell is that? AUKUS. It's terrifying to the people of the world. We're going to create an alliance called AUKUS. And we're going to have nuclear submarines. But it's not nuclear non-proliferation. Because we're not violating the NPT, which is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Australia is not technically a nuclear power. You know that, right? Even though it's like a white country, basically. And, you sort of sometimes can be forgiven because you might imagine, well, it's Australia, they must have nuclear weapons. They're not a nuclear power. And hats off to Prime Minister Ardern of New Zealand. And she didn't join AUKUS because I don't know what the acronym would be like if there was a NZ in AUKUS. AUKUS. So, it's not a violation of the non-proliferation treaty, although we don't care if we violate international law and so on. But it's not because the nuclear submarines are only nuclear powered. They're not going to carry nuclear weapons. Did you see that? That was amazing. I was like, wow, guys, you got the best. Like, there's 100 lawyers or 500 that went over the thing. This is how you have to say it, Joe. It's not a nuclear submarine. It's a nuclear-powered submarine. We're going to create this alliance, AUKUS. And we're going to threaten the Chinese. Although, of course, they already had an alliance called the Quad, which is India, Japan, Australia, United States. They're going to meet this week in person, the leaders of these countries. Mr. Suga of Japan, Modi of India, that great democratic leader, Narendra Modi of India, the great large democracy in India, which has decided that Muslims, second-class citizens, also decided Kashmir don't need any rights, also decided journalists don't know what they are. We don't have them in Indian culture. Indian culture doesn't need journalism. It's a cultural relativist thing and so on. Journalists, they are criminal. It's a synonym for criminals. They can be in jail. That's a better place for them and so on, right? They already have a platform called the Quad. But the problem with the Quad is it's not all the great settler colonial powers. Because this is the authentic alliance. This is the United States, the United Kingdom. Look at their names. Why do you need an article before the name of your country? It's not the India and the Japan. It should be the Australia and the United States and the United Kingdom. AUKUS. We've just been humiliated by the Afghans, but we're going to go to war against China. 1.4 billion. The first point I want to make for you, and you must be wondering, what's the point? Is no left force in the world, no self-respecting left force should allow itself to be weaponized into this war against China. I don't care, I literally don't care what your assessment is of the Communist Party, of Xi Jinping. I don't even care if you're a racist against the Chinese people. I honestly don't care. But if you're a self-respecting human being, you should not want the world to enter a war where the United States, which is a nutty country, is willing to go to war against 1.4 billion people when it was just defeated by a country of 38 million. This is just about mathematics, guys. And let me tell you something. The Chinese have a much bigger army and navy and air force and nuclear weapons than the Afghans, particularly they have much more armaments than the Taliban. Now, this is a really bad idea, guys. You need to go out there and campaign like hell against this war. And I really don't think that this is an issue. I really don't think this is an issue of what you feel about the Chinese Revolution. I really don't think that's the point right now. I mean, I'm going to say a few things about what I think is happening in China, but that's not important. I could actually stop right now. Because all I want from you, all I'm asking of you, is to campaign. I want you to campaign against this war. I want you to join whatever platform exists in the world. I belong, the Chow Collective is a part of the No Cold War platform, nocoldwar.org. I want you to at least go to our website, sign that statement, take that statement to your neighbors, to your colleagues, to your friends. If you don't want to take the statement, talk to people. We don't need this war. The world doesn't need this confrontation. You know, the United Nations has said we need more collaboration in this period. We've got a pandemic. We have a climate catastrophe. 2.7 billion people don't know where their next meal is coming from. And you tell me the most pressing issue for the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia is to create bloody AUKUS. You know, we've got a meeting coming up in Glasgow, the COP meeting for climate change. Where's the global alliance against the destruction of the planet? Where's that? 2.7 billion people are starving. Which countries have come together to say we need to create a global alliance? FUSCUS, MUSCUS, whatever the hell it's called, against hunger. Where's that? How do we take these people seriously? How do we take Joe Biden seriously? How do we take Scott Morrison, of all people, mediocre person? How do we take Scott Morrison seriously? Boris Johnson is a clown. If anybody thinks I'm a stupid, foolish person, and if they think Boris Johnson is this, I'll take stupid on myself, okay? I'll take a hit for you. But I will not accept the fact that I'm more a clown than Boris Johnson. I mean, how do these people have the right to take us into a catastrophic confrontation with a country like China, which has just helped eradicate absolute poverty in that country? What gives us the right to do that? So, for the rest of my talk here with you, I want to say a few things about China, not a huge amount. I've been recently going back and reading the work of Chinese intellectuals that I greatly admire. I greatly admire Wang Hui, for instance, who is a scholar of Chinese literature and thought, teaches at Tsinghua University. I greatly admire Li Bo, who teaches Chinese studies at Fudan. I greatly admire Zhang Weiwei, who's the founder of the Institute of Chinese Studies at Fudan. Zhang Weiwei spent a lot of time in Geneva, understands the West, and so I greatly admire these people. Why? Because they're trying to understand the direction of their society. Years ago, in 2011, 10 years ago, Chen Enfu, who was then a senior scholar at the Chinese Academy of Advanced Studies in Beijing, Chen Enfu came to India. He gave a lecture in Trivandrum about the 7 schools of thought in China. It was so interesting, you know. I had no idea that there were 7 schools of thought in China. Because, you know, there's a kind of incipient ignorance that people have about places like China. You just think of China, you know. We talk of China like it's like the Borg, you know. There's like the Chinese, China does this, and China. It's 1.4 billion people, guys. Do you know how many people that is? Do you know what the population of the United States? It's like 4 times or 5 times the population of the United States. That's a lot of people. You know, I mean, in the United States, there's a lot of different opinions. There's like post-structuralists and Foucauldians and, you know, and Stalinists and, you know. No, sorry, I meant, we're talking about the United States. There's liberals and neoliberals and and conservative liberals and fascistic liberals and Trumpian liberals and, I forgot, yeah. There are many contending schools of thought in the United States, but we somehow assume that in China there's like Chinese, There's like the Mao period, and then there's the Deng period, and everybody's like Deng, Mao, and like Xi Jinping, It's incredible, right? It's like a racist belief that 1.4 billion people just sort of orient themselves like we are now in the world of this thought. Everybody march to, right? Isn't that the way people talk about China? Like, am I wrong about this? This is not what I'm saying. I'm just channeling what I think people say, that I don't believe that. I don't want to be misunderstood because I know social media is a really cruel thing. People will say, do you know what he said? He said all Chinese think the same. Somebody's going to take that clip that I just said that and they'll make that a thing, Social media is a really scary thing, right? Right? I am scared of social media because of this reason, right? Anyway, so Chen En-fu comes to Trivandrum, which is the capital of Kerala, a state governed by the Left Democratic Front, of which there are communist parties, and it's an amazing place in the world, 38 million people. They're not all communists. Please don't misunderstand that. There's a lot of people with terrible ideas. There's a big debate happening now. Because again, everybody from Kerala isn't, we are communist, it's not like that. There's people of different views and so on. So we should never, idealize a place and think, oh, you're from Kerala, you must be a communist. No, it could be a right-wing nut, it's as much a possibility, right? You meet somebody from China, they might be somebody who, I'm a Chinese banker, I believe in Adam Smith and, Milton Friedman, and you're as likely to meet a Milton Friedman supporter in China as you are a person who says, I think Mao is a great person and so on. So Chen En-fu said there are 7 contending schools of thought. I thought that's fascinating. He said there are liberals, people who think, this is funny, people who think Thomas Jefferson is the way forward, I was like, I'm not sure even actually in the United States, there are a lot of people who think a slave owner like Thomas Jefferson is the way forward, So there are people there, and then he said there are revivalists or Maoists, there are traditional Marxists, and then of course, the way we all do as intellectuals, and then there are innovative Marxists, like him, and I like to think of myself as an innovative Marxist. Because who wants to say, like, I'm an orthodox Marxist? I'm an innovative Marxist, and so on. 7 schools of thought. That's interesting. But it's not only that there are many schools of thought in China. That's only one of the issues. The other thing is there have been fierce debates inside China amongst intellectuals, amongst party members. When you have a communist party with hundreds of millions of members, they have tens of millions of opinions in different parts of the country. And there was a terrible decade in the 90s when debate and argument was hard to come by. Because it's not that there was no opinions allowed, because the right of the argument held the high ground. And it's at that point that Wang Hui, this great intellectual, thought seriously about the idea of confidence that a country has in its traditions. Why was Chinese intellectualism, or the intellectual class, but also elements of the party, why were they losing faith in their own traditions and looking to Washington, D.C., New York City, and so on, Harvard University for inspiration? Why were they looking to Thomas Jefferson to lead them forward after the 1990s? Why were they doing that? And so he went back and he reconstructed this 4-volume text on the history of Chinese thought, but I'm not getting into that. What I want to talk about is that even in this time, the left was trying to engage and find a way to break out of a relative rightward drift in Chinese society. In fact, this rightward drift had been detected by Deng Xiaoping in 1983 when he said, there's a serious problem in our country. The poison of bourgeois thought has come back. This is in 83. Deng Xiaoping had a campaign against the poisons of bourgeois thought. You know, Engels, years ago, old Freddie, smartest Marxist there ever was. I love, you know what's great about Freddie Engels? When he died, he said, cremate me. I like that. That's great. And take my ashes to the beach and throw them into the ocean. There's no grave for Freddie anywhere. You know, he was thrown, and there's a little plaque that says, we came and threw his ashes here. Fred Engels said, before he died, he said, our socialist history is a history of zigzags. Because we're dealing with real people. There are real people involved in socialist construction. And we carry with us the flotsam of confidence, lack of confidence, fear of the unknown. Because socialism is the unknown. We know wretchedness of hierarchy. We know inequality. We know all these things. We know what it's like to be oppressed. We don't know what it's like to be free. And we're scared of freedom. Let's be honest, okay? We're scared of freedom. We're scared of making a revolution. We don't want to make a catastrophic mistake. We allow the drift back to the past to take place so fast. That undertow that pulls you back to the past is really strong. It's not like Deng Xiaoping was like, let's move back to the United States, restore capitalism. How many books I read with that title, The Restoration of Capitalism? They were struggling with something, how to build socialism in a wretchedly poor country. That was the assignment. Wasn't easy. Punctually in Chinese history, you've had the Communist Party figure out they made enormous mistakes. What do we think about the Great Leap Forward? May not have been such a great idea. What do we think about the Cultural Revolution? Not sure. What do we think about the 78 reforms? Well, we may have gone too far. Experimentation is an interesting facet of Chinese communism.
好，维杰·普拉萨德在2021年的这段演讲我们就听到这里。他以标志性的风格酣畅淋漓地表达了他的思想。他首先把美国定义为国际秩序中最大的法律无赖和伪善者，并以此为基础得出了一个非常重要的结论，那就是美国在道义上没有权利去审判中国或其他任何国家。接着，他以美军在阿富汗地区的溃败和 AUKUS 联盟的成立为案例，辛辣地讽刺了西方世界根深蒂固的白人至上心态。基于此，他向所有听众发出了一个非常具体的行动呼吁，那就是无论对中国内部的看法如何，都必须立刻行动起来，去反对这场由美国主导的极其危险的新冷战。在呼吁行动之后，他也探讨了中国本身，试图打破西方对中国的刻板印象，向听众展示了中国社会内部思想的多元性，以及中国在社会主义探索过程中的曲折性。好了，今天的分享就到这里，欢迎订阅我们的频道，咱们下次见。